Hello subscribers and non-subscribers, and welcome back to ChäoS. Now this will probably be a longer episode because I actually have the time to go and record a longer episode, because I am recording this on the Monday before the video is supposed to go live. And I'm able to do this because I was able to go and actually record American Civil War Brothers vs. Brothers on the previous Friday. So I actually have time to go and record this, as I said, or at least to record a longer episode. So this episode will be, if I can get my timer, we're gonna go with 50 minutes technically isn't really that much longer than some of these episodes end up being, because I wait sometimes to get to essentially the end of a chapter, but I'm going to set the timer for 50 minutes. So let me go and actually load first before I start the timer. Okay, and start the timer for 50 minutes. The sweet smell of shampoo that came floating from my hair tickled my nose, and I knew my face was getting flushed with heat. A deal? She wore a terribly serious expression as she watched me. My breath caught in my throat. In return, she would... do what? Sort of hear the music in the background, and that should be fine. Remy laid her pointer finger against my lips. She was telling me to keep quiet. But doing this kind of thing in the middle of the store. Remy looked down at me bashfully as though she'd read my mind. Well, except if they end up turning a corner and see you right smack dab in the middle of an aisle of CDs. Yeah, sure, nobody will be able to see you. So what about it? Remy's face came even closer to mine, her breath tickled my cheek. A hot sigh. I was too captivated to look away from Remy's ardent eyes. Her gaze seemed to draw me in. Remy looked directly back at me. Still looking, she began moving her hands alone, undoing the buttons on my blazer one by one. Remy reached for my necktie without answering, pulling me toward her as she loosened it. She moved down to undo my shirt buttons as well. Her slim hands, belaying her words, slipped past my bare chest into my shirt. Her cool hand slid leisurely across my skin. A bewitching smile. I felt a pang in my chest at the sight of her expression. She was normally so bright and cheerful, and gave off little in the way of a sexual atmosphere.
タクの胸ドキドキしてる。
リミってテラエロス。
テラエロス？
Ah, crap. I'd blurted out exactly what I was thinking. That alone was enough to unsettle me.
それってどういう意味かな？
Well, I would think it would be pretty obvious. People tend to use the term uber when they're referring to something that is super. And then, of course, ero being short for erotic. So, I think combining those two, you can come up with a reasonable expectation of, or reasonable idea as to the meaning of just saying uber ero.
教えてよ、タク。
Of course, though, she may just be playing dumb for the hell of it. It means you're amazingly hot. The tips of Rimi's fingers caressed the sides of my neck, crawling over my skin. It tickled, and it felt amazing.
私のこと好きにしたくなってきた。
And I'm expecting this to end long before anything actually happens. Guided by instinct, I nodded vigorously.
じゃあここでしちゃうか。
I doubted my ears. Do it here? Did that mean...
何を？
Yep, see?
おーい。
I don't know why, for a second there it kind of looked like her hair moved a little. I abruptly came back to myself. Rimi was waving her hand in front of my face, eyebrows knitted in wonderment. I was sitting on the floor and she was straddling my leg. And she wasn't straddling my legs. And I read the first part of that wrong as well. We were simply standing normally, facing one another.
どうしたの？急に意識がどこかに飛んじゃってたみたいだけど。
なんでもない。
落ち着け。
I leapt away from Rimi, turned my back on her, and took deep breaths. I had an arrow delusion. I was indeed the lowest of the low. I became quite disgruntled with myself. No, it was also Rimi's fault for talking about repaying me. Any male would start imagining stuff if he had heard such a suggestive, sexy line. Come to think of it, how did she intend to repay me after all?
その調子だと話聞いてなかったでしょ。
うん。
じゃあもう一回言うけど、私のお気に入り CD を貸すっていうので手を打ってくれないかな。
は？
ねえねえ、いいでしょ？お願いします。この通り。
あ
あ。Well, there's reality for you. Speaking of which, why had I fantasized about things ending up that way with Rimi anyway? I wasn't supposed to be interested in 3D girls. When I nodded right away in answer to Rimi's suggestion, she struck a joyful victory pose. It was so funny looking that I found myself laughing despite the danger of my situation. Somehow we made it back to my base without any incidents. It was all thanks to Rimi, of course. I owed her one. But I was a tad put off by how she instantly rejected my request to wait outside while I tidied up my room a little.
だって前に来た時に汚いっていうのはよーくわかったし、今さら片付けたって無駄だよ。かっこつけなくてもいいって、私とタクの中でしょ？ね？
What kind of pals? Rimi was absent from my memory, and so I didn't really know. Once in a while, I was startled by Rimi's familiarity toward me. It wasn't at all unpleasant, but there were definite discrepancies in the sense of distance we each felt between each other. And for that matter, I wondered if Rimi was serious about it being okay not to clean up my room. Even though convenience store lunchboxes I'd finished eating were scattered on the floor along with utensils, and eroge boxes with sensationalistic illustrations on them were piled up on the bed. Either Rimi wasn't the sensitive sort, or she didn't perceive me to be any kind of threat. Both prospects left me feeling kind of ambiguous. Apparently, not to notice any of my distress, Rimi sat on the sofa and earnestly looked down at the lyrics booklet that had been included with Phantasm's CD. I dropped heavily into my computer chair and made the tension leave my body. My nerves had worn thin from cowering in fear the whole day, but maybe the reason I didn't feel all that exhausted was because Rimi was here with me.
さて、どうしようか。
Rimi closed the lyrics booklet, stretched grandly, and sent a smile my way. What to do, she'd asked, and what was I supposed to do? Rimi hadn't come here to hang out in the first place. Her original aim had been to borrow my CD. If she were going to do me the favor of staying here with me, how should I respond? Did I even have to do anything to begin with? If this were an eroge, we'd jump right into an H scene, but... crappity crap. I better not think about that sort of thing right now. Even under the best of circumstances, I would still feel very strained being alone in my room with a 3D girl. If I let my imagination run wild with me unnecessarily, I'd become overly conscious of her, and might do something weird to give myself away. Silence. Rimi gazed vaguely at the manga volumes scattered on the floor and the eroge stacked on the bed. So awkward. I had the sense that I ought to start a conversation, but I couldn't think of any potential topics except games or anime. I didn't think she would know much about them. Anyway, she said she would be there for me, so maybe she would spare me and start talking first. I'd be in trouble if she expected me to take the conversational lead. And actually, you know what? Give me 1 second. Let me go ahead and pause the timer. So 1 second, I just want to make sure that this is indeed recording, because I don't use Bandicam all that often. Okay, yes it is. I just wanted to make sure, because the main thing I don't like about using Bandicam to record things, especially when I have to use the screen capture method, is that I have no way of actually knowing if an application like this, which is full screen, is actually being recorded or not. But yeah, so it is. Let me go ahead and resume the timer and continue on. Pretty sure I just read this, so we'll go on to the next line. I didn't know how to handle 3D girls after all. I was grateful to her for staying with me, but I wouldn't be able to hold up under the pressure of this silence. The dimness of my room was also part of the issue. It gave me the hallucination that there was something lewd in the air between us. Unable to keep still, I turned my face to my PC. There was something I had to look up. I thought of it earlier at school, something that might be a hint about how to come into possession of a D-sword. Is it possible to change your imagined visions into actual visions, or actual images? Using the things Senna had told me about VR technology and how humans are electrical devices as a springboard, I began probing into the matter.
何してるの?
Rimi stood up and approached me. Should I explain? But how best to explain it to her? What a hassle.
ねえねえ、何してるか教えてよ。
When I didn't react, Rimi started poking me in the back with her finger. I certainly couldn't ignore her, could I?
君はその妄想が現実になるって信じられる?
As I entered search keywords into my browser, I spoke without looking over at Rimi. In fact, it's more like I was addressing Sarah.
妄想が現実に無理でしょう。もしそれができたら人はとっくに万能になってるよ。
Omnipotent. Huh. That very well might be the case. Delusions were a world where even the most unrealistic things became possible. If they became reality, it would mean making the unreal into something real.
それがどうしたの？
それに近いシステムがアメリカで特許あるんだ。
へえ、冗談でしょ。
I sensed Remy letting out an exasperated sigh behind me. In answer, I opened the aforementioned patent images I'd received from Shiho.
これは？
特許の証拠写真。
Even though, of course, in theory, there's nothing stopping someone from having completely made this in Photoshop and tricking you into thinking it's real.
本当に？
Leaning forward, Remy brought her face nearer to the monitor. She ended up peering into it from very close beside me.
私英語って苦手。すごいね、タク。英語読めるなんて。
So close. She was so near me, I could see the reflection of the monitor sparkling in her eyes. I was starting to get flustered again.
ねえねえ、どういうことか教えてよ。
Apparently, it had drawn her interest. Doing my best not to think about how close she was, I focused on looking back and forth between my monitor and Seira.
生まれながらに盲目の人でもビデオカメラみたいな映像機器を通すことでそこに映る景色が見えるようになるんだ。これ豆知識な。
A very basic idea as to how it's supposed to function.
ビデオカメラが目の代わりっていうこと？
Yeah, more or less.
そう VR 技術って言うんだよ。
Now, not the VR, we're talking about the virtual reality things.
へえ、もし本当だったらすごいな。
I don't quite remember what they said VR in this case is supposed to mean. I mean, it's been a couple months now since they said that. I'm telling you, it is real. Senna had said the tests were successful.
でも機械を使って目が見えるようになるのと妄想が現実になるってどうつながるの？私頭悪いからよくわかんないや。
While explaining to Remy, I played around with likely sounding search keywords using trial and error, but I couldn't find the sort of page I'd been looking for. Even so, I persisted in inputting more new keywords.
映像機器に映る景色も脳内で思い浮かべた妄想も電気信号だから。逆に考えるんだ。脳内に電気信号を送るんじゃなくて脳内から電気信号を送るって考えるんだ。
ほほう。
Ambiguous answers were all that came back to me. Maybe she didn't understand. Very well. It'd be a bother to explain in greater detail, so I gave up on talking about it. I concentrated instead on looking things up. Well, it wasn't like I needed her to understand, because in the end, it was nothing more than my own deductions. Remy went on nodding and making noises of assent all on her own. I figured I would leave her be. I'd run a variety of searches, but I couldn't find any documents verifying my line of reasoning. Deciding to alter my approach a little, I began running searching, emphasizing the patent-related aspect of it. I went to a foreign wiki site that Shiho had told me about, one all about American patents. I began searching to see if there were any patents similar to what I had in mind. As I jumped from link to link, I finally hit on an image similar in atmosphere to the one Shiho had passed on to me before. It appeared to be a different patent document than the one about VR equipment. I swiftly skimmed the contents.
神経信号パルスを遠隔地からモニターし、それを映像および音声として再現する装置と方法。
おお
It was exactly what I'd been thinking of. I unthinkingly hovered out of my chair.
これすごいぞ。
すごいの？何が何が？
簡単に言うとこれ他人の思考を盗撮する技術だ。
思考を盗撮。
In short, it meant you could use special machinery to spy on the sounds and images people thought of in their heads. On top of that, it said the neural pulse monitoring could be performed via satellite. That would make it possible to film the thoughts of everyone on the planet.
本当にそんなことできるの？ SF 小説とかそういう類のものなんじゃ？
特許ってそのシステム自体が完全に仕上がってないと。
I don't think that's 100% true. Although I could be wrong. But I think you can generally patent just about anything so long as you at least have a theory of it that works. It doesn't necessarily have to be... I don't think it necessarily has to be 100% perfect. It just has to get across the general concept.
絶対に取得できないんだって。
But, of course, I know nothing about patent law, so I could be completely off base there. So it had said when I looked up patents online.
だからこれもちゃんとシステムが確立されてるってことだよ。
This wasn't fiction. With enough money and technological power to construct the system, it could be made into reality at any time. This is what Senna had told me.
ある意図的な情報を神経パルスへコンバートすることが可能なら、人の五感すべて、さらには人の意志そのものもコントロールできるんじゃないか。
There had been no source for that theory, so ultimately it amounted to no more than Senna's deductive reasoning. But a source had emerged, for the theory I thought of. I wondered why such an amazing news story remained totally unknown in Japan. Frankly, it seemed Nobel Prize worthy to me. I went on to run a search for the words thought recording. What came up were the records from an American lawsuit.
また英文だ。頭痛くなってきそうだよ。
It was fairly long, so it looked like I'd have a pretty hard time reading it as well. The phrasing might get kind of weird, but I used an automatic translator to convert it to Japanese. The contents were, in sum, something along the lines of the following. Lawsuit brief. Plaintiff N.K. Rabin, defendant, the United States Department of Defense Central Intelligence Agency. The plaintiff's claims? My thoughts have been spied on by means of a special device recorded and broadcast to an unknown destination via satellite. These satellites have taken me hostage, day and night without end. Numerous satellites constantly assault me. 1. Tracking. 2. Observation. 3. Full body surveillance. 4. Biorhythmic attacks. 5. Oral attacks. 6. Physical debilitation. Since the latter part of December 1990, I've been forced to view man-made dreams, including both visual and aural components, as I sleep. And I probably mispronounced that. From February to May 1992, I underwent biorhythmic assault, pain, torture, harassment. Recognizing this as an attack against me, I began recording the following items in notes, beginning in February 1992. Date, time, the contents of particularly agonizing psychological attacks. Biorhythmic attacks were carried out against every part of my body. All those portions of my body were adjusted to best receive the unpleasantness, exhaustion, and suffering induced by pain, torture, and harassment. The main regions are listed below. Chest, vision, lower abdomen, brain to interfere with my sleep, brain to show me artificial dreams.
思考監視、思考盗撮、しかも国家ぐるみ。マジ？
私これ知ってる。何年か前に映画で見た。
That's fiction. But the brief written here wasn't. There were two possibilities. The plaintiff was merely a mental patient, or the whole thing was fact. It was difficult to discern the boundary between the two. It seemed as though it could be truthful, considering the patent I'd seen earlier, But Senna and Ayase weren't mentally ill, especially Ayase. At the time, Ayase had become two people before my very eyes. I hadn't witnessed the second when she became like that, but when I turned around, another Ayase was there, in a school swimsuit to boot. She had showed me how she pulled her D-sword out of thin air as well. It hadn't been an illusion, or a delusion. Once she showed me something like that, I couldn't say she was simply sick in the head anymore. Only, Ayase had told me the following.
君が望んだ妄想よ。
That mysterious phenomenon really had been. Was it truly the result of what I'd envisioned? Right beforehand, immediately, I had been thinking about how Moe would be if Ayase wore a school swimsuit.
理想度は力を持つ人の目にしか映らない。君には私の剣が見えているでしょう。
No, right now we cannot see your sword, but yes, generally speaking, we can see it.
それが意味するのは一つだけ。
Was this what she had been referring to when she mentioned the power? The power to project illusions into reality. Perhaps I possessed it. No. I was getting way ahead of myself here. It was too much of a leap to assume such a supernatural power existed, simply because there was a system capable of scientifically replaying delusions on film.
見つけなくちゃいけない。自分自身。
I'm trying to think. Is this still technically considered to be a part of the whole original green path that we took or not? Because if it is, then I see no reason to go red. Might as well go green. But if it's actually considered to be completely separate, which is a possibility, then we probably want to go red. But I think it might be still a part of the original that we started last episode. Even though we did transition, I think, to technically a new section of this chapter. I'm going to go green because I still think it's a part of the original. And we'll see what we get.
方法なんて私にはわからない。
Except, what if? The way to come into possession of a D-sword required precisely that sort of supernatural power. And if I bore such a power within me, it might very well be worth a try. Leaving Rimi to gaze at the monitor, her eyebrows furrowed, I picked up the toy D-sword propped up in a corner of my room. I stood in the center of the room and held it up at eye level, just like an Ensu character. I closed my eyes. I attempted to picture a sword in my head. Of course, I based it on the ones Senna and Ayase possess, lovely, ominous, and sharp enough to sever anything at a single touch. I'm good at daydreaming. After all, I have all kinds of daydreams on a daily basis. If I wanted to, I could come up with a clear vision that included even the tiniest little details. When I had somehow managed to solidify my mental image, I gripped my molars and clenched the sword in both hands. Become real. Okay, I'm not going to bother reading that entire thing. I prayed. I thought of solely one thing. I was currently gripping a true D-sword, not a knockoff, the real thing. I flexed all the muscles of my body. Come, show yourself before me. Please bring me salvation. Please protect me. I stealthily opened my eyes. The sword I held on high hadn't changed a bit. As before, it was a cheap-looking toy.
そりゃそうだよな。
There couldn't be any such thing as the evil eye-esque paranormal ability to turn delusions into reality. The idea of it was blatantly overblown. I was embarrassed that I'd been on the verge of believing I had a power like that. I sighed and lowered the sword. That was when I sensed a gaze at my back. A prickling sensation at the back of my neck, and goose flesh sprang up all over me. That gaze again. I sensed a distinct presence. Someone was watching me. Don't look at me. I'm not going to turn around. Like you could ever make me turn around. Hmm? It wasn't merely a presence, I also heard a voice just now. To be more accurate, it was a sound like someone breathing, rather than using words. No way. I might have made an unbelievably stupid misunderstanding. I quietly turned around. Remy was staring at me. Oh, so that was it. It made sense that it picked up on a much more vivid presence than usual, which was natural enough since she'd actually been watching me, and it wasn't just me having the feeling of being watched. She'd sure misled me. Wait, had Remy seen the part where I brandished the sword, exposing my immature middle school student's mentality from start to finish? That would be pretty humiliating. But something about her was strange. Remy wrinkled her forehead as she stared in my direction without a single blink. On top of that, she wasn't looking at me, but rather at the toy D-sword I held. Why was she wearing such a grave expression? She seemed like a different person from when she had tilted her head upon hearing what I had to say about the pageant. Unpleasant memories grazed the back of my brain. Remy was my ally. She was supposed to be. But that didn't mean I'd solved every one of her mysteries. Did Remy know something about D-swords? I swallowed conclusively and began timidly speaking to her.
たく
Her gaze fixed in place, Remy opened her mouth. She spoke in a stifled voice, one empty of all emotion.
その件だけど
Remy was my ally, right? She wouldn't betray me like Yua, would she? If even Remy betrayed me,
捨てた方がいい
どうして
Okay, well, I ended up accidentally cutting her off. But, she didn't say too much. Just telling us that we should throw it away. My voice came close to cracking. Had I been right to think Remy knew something?
だって
Finally, shifting her line of sight, Remy met my gaze straight from the front. I hastily averted my eyes. After all, what? Were you saying?
だってもう高校生だし
Without warning, Remy's face broke into a mischievous smile. The suddenness of her transformation took the wind out of my sails.
そりゃ男の子っていくつになってもそういうおもちゃが大好きなんだなってのはなんとなくわかるけど、さすがにそんな大きなおもちゃ一人で部屋で振り回してるのはどうかと思うよ。それが許されるのは小学生までじゃない？でもタクの個人的な趣味を私の前で披露してくれたってのはちょっと嬉しいかも。私にだけ秘密を教えてくれたみたいで。
What's with that? Kinda freaked out for no reason.
そもそもそれどこで買ってきたの？高かったんじゃない
？1万円渋谷の雑貨屋で。
へえ、1万円か。安いのか高いのかわからないけど。
Well, for me, there's this little thing that I like to call Google. If you give me 1 second, I can give you and everybody else an idea as to just how expensive or cheap that is. Okay, so 10,000 Japanese yen, according to Google's currency converter, is 96.1557 US dollars. So 96.16 US dollars. It's pretty much just using the current exchange rate, of course, so I mean, if I wanted to know basically how much it's actually supposed to be when this game came out, first I have to look when the game came out, but two, I'd have to jump through a couple of hoops to convert to that, and I don't really feel like doing that. Yeah, So, like $96. Some would say that's expensive, some would say that's cheap. I guess it just depends on how much you're willing to spend for what is, in this case, a crappy wooden sword.
でもそんな大きなおもちゃが普通に売ってるんだね。私そんな大きなのを直接見たのって初めて。その雑貨屋さんに売ってるっていうのは誰かに教えてもらったの？
She seemed unwilling to let the topic go. Was she interested in this sort of sword? Maybe Remy was secretly into grand-seeming make-believe stuff too. While teasing me a little for owning the sword, did she, in truth, desperately long for one of her own? LOL. That's so tsundere.
自分で調べた。ネットで。
ネットか。
Yes, do you really think the main character would know anybody that would tell him to go to this variety store to buy the sword? I mean, he lives in a shipping container on the roof of an apartment complex, for Christ's sake.
すごいな。何でも情報が手に入るんだね。私は全然ダメ。パソコンなんてろくに使えないよ。
I mean, yes, there are people that struggle sometimes to even turn on a computer. And they struggle to launch applications and things like that. But the actual immediate use of a computer is fairly simple. So, yeah. Now, I granted building them is also fairly simple, but some people like to think of it as being very difficult. But I'm sorry, the actual use of the computer itself is very simple, so it's strange that you can't use computers properly.
で、その剣って流行ってるの？
If it was a new trend, you'd probably see a lot of people with one.
なんで？
タクはどうしてそれを買おうと思ったのかなって。
Should I tell the real reason? If she were going to be there for me from now on, maybe we might end up searching for a real D-sword together in the future. It might be better to say it all here and now.
これは偽物だけど本物があるんだ。
本物？
Remy regarded me dubiously, tilting her head.
本物を持ってる人を僕知ってるんだ。2人いる同じ学校の女子。
Oh, is Remy gonna freak out at the fact that we mentioned 2 girls? And the fact that we know people that have the real thing?
女子ね。
Yeah, looks like she's not too happy about that.
女の子がこんなおもちゃを欲しがるかな。
Okay, or maybe not.
本当なんだ。それにおもちゃじゃない。
ああ、ごめん。
本物は光るんだ。それにすごい存在感で。僕それを探してる。それさえ手に入れれば僕は救われるんだ。
救われるって。
Ruby's face went blank as if she felt taken aback, but I was utterly in earnest. Besides, a D-sword would be a powerful source of support when it came to defying Shogun.
それで
I wanted to ask her to help me search for it. But when I thought about the possibility of her turning me down, I became scared and insecure and lost the ability to say anything at all. Lobbing the fake sword aside, I sat on the couch. I sighed and closed my eyes. Maybe Remy would offer to help me look for it on her own accord. If so, I'd give her my okay ASAP. Although it certainly wasn't realistic to expect that much. It was just that up until now, Remy had emerged in front of me whenever I was in a pinch, as though she'd heard the voice of my heart, as though she were riding in on her white horse. And so, maybe.
とにかくもし本物があったとしてもそれこそ買ったりしちゃダメだよ。今タクが持ってるのはおもちゃだからいいけど、本物ってことは銃刀法違反になっちゃうんだから。
She instantly shattered my expectations. I'm disappointed in you, Remy. Well, no doubt her reaction was quite upstanding from the point of view of your average Joe, or in her case, your average Jane. These past few weeks, I'd run into all kinds of inexplicable or unexplainable things, and I'd been on the brink of believing everything Senna and Ayase had told me. But perhaps my own choice was to search for the D sword on my own, after all, or my only choice.
それでタク、
I sensed Remy sit down next to me.
その本物の剣を持ってる女子って誰かな。
I heard her voice from close by. She was right beside me. The two of us, all alone, in a dim, closed room. Moreover, we were sitting next to each other. It's a state of emergency. I have entered a state of emergency.
タクに女子の知り合いが私以外にいたなんてちょっとびっくり。もしかして彼女？
So we really are going to end up talking about that kind of thing. Could it be that Remy was tempting me? The only conversation that could possibly develop from this topic was one about romance. And she'd say things to me that sounded rather like a confession, and there start to be some real nice vibes between us, and... No, I'm totally unprepared for this. I opened my eyes and frantically shook my head. Both Aisei and Senna were mysterious beings, and both of them were weirdos, but in a cute, eccentric way. I'd have moe'd over them if they were 2D characters, but I couldn't moe over something 3-dimensional, especially Senna. Simply talking to her made me cower. She seemed like she wouldn't have any qualms about using violence. If possible, I'd want to avoid getting tangled up with her.
そうか。ちょっと安心したかな。
She took the shaking of the head as, no, neither of them are our girlfriend. It's a flag! And someone forgot to keep holding shift when they were putting in the exclamation marks, would be my guess. Also, I guess go green, because this still seems to be a part of that original thing. Oh my crap! And I'm not going to go and try and read that, because I can't really read oh crap that quickly. And I think I said oh my crap. That doesn't sound right at all. I unthinkingly froze in place. She had clearly said that on purpose, right? What, was she seducing me here? Going by the sequential flow of this conversation, there was a huge chance that Remy had me totally wrapped around her little finger. How was I supposed to answer? Would it be possible if I said what she was expecting? That wouldn't feel bad at all, but I don't have enough self-confidence to go out with a living, breathing girl. Unsure what to do, I took a furtive, I guess, look at Remy's expression. What? Hold on. How? Why? How? The inside of my head went pure white. My thoughts couldn't keep up with this abrupt and inconceivable turn of events. I couldn't so much as move a single finger. Shock prevented my voice from coming out.
どうかした？
At some point, Remy had taken off her uniform's jacket. Not only that, but when I looked closer, she'd also taken off her skirt. On top of that, because she was sitting with her knees up while in such a provocative getup, it could also look like she was going commando. In other words, Remy, who cocked her head to one side as she looked at me from right beside me, was wearing only a white button-down shirt over her underwear. The first thing that popped in my head was a famous eroge about a home tutor. It was titled Undressable Miss Emery, and the third chapter included a situation exactly the same as what I was experiencing in reality at this very moment. To think that kind of scenario that made people joke, what eroge is that from, would actually happen to me. Was this a delusion? Or an illusion? Or 100% real? Real or imaginary, the one certain thing was that Rimi was right in front of me, looking oh so sexy. My eyes kept involuntarily traveling to her chest. The front of her button-down shirt was undone and I could see little glimpses of it from certain angles. Her pale pink bra. Let's see. Your bust is surprisingly big, Sakiata. No, stop. She'll think you're a lech if you ogle her. Don't look. You mustn't look. I dropped my gaze. At this time, I ended up looking at her hips. She really wasn't wearing a skirt. I could see panties, Sakiata. They were rather simple panties, but daring all the same. Oh, yeah. Well, You said that the way she was sitting made it appear as though she was going commando. That would imply that in reality you can't really see her panties. And so as far as you can tell, I mean, obviously you can come up with a reasonable expectation that she probably is wearing panties, but nonetheless, he said earlier that the way she was sitting made it difficult to see that, and so it looked almost as if she was going commando. So, how can you say they're simple panties? Though, of course, they're probably a pair to match the bra, but still. Shit! My Johnson was starting to stand to attention. I had been picking up on the sweet scent she gave off for a while now, and how do I put it? There's a huge difference between her on the one hand and figures and 2D stuff on the other when it came to the sense of touchability her skin radiated. Was this the power of the third dimension? To be honest, it was too hot for me. My entire system of values was being unavoidably rewritten, even though I'd never meant to have any interest in the third dimension, even though I only loved 2D characters. The current Rimi possessed sufficient destructive power to almost completely smash my dearly-held convictions in one blow. A faint, slightly exhilarating sounding breath. Her glossy, delicately quivering hair, the way her chest rose and fell minutely each time she inhaled. How she fitfully rubbed her thighs together as though yearning for something. Moistly glistening eyes, the pink tongue that peeped out from between her parted lips. I couldn't breathe. My head went empty. What was this? Essentially like what I felt when I entered ecchi scenes in eroge, an itchy, ardent, sorrowful feeling. I couldn't keep my cool. Rimi spoke to me in a sweet voice. I couldn't tear my eyes away from her limbs any longer. It was the first time I'd seen the body of a girl my age from so close up. Was Rimi inviting me? Did she like me? In truth, I didn't care for this kind of shameless seduction. Romantic emotions really ought to be cultivated via platonic relationship, so then she could bashfully muster all her courage and confess to me under the legendary tree on the day of our graduation, and wow, okay. And when I said sure, she'd burst into tears of happiness and we kiss. Was what I thought. But when she sat in front of me in this state, inviting me, who'd give a crap about that platonic whatever shit? Losing the ability to withstand my anguish, I stood up forcefully. A drink. Did I have anything in the fridge? There was some Coke I'd been sipping from, but I drunk it straight from the bottle, so I couldn't exactly give it to Rimi. I heard Rimi stand up behind me. Was she leaving? When I spun around, flustered, Rimi was about to open the door and depart in the same embarrassing state as before. You're going shopping at a convenience store with your panties totally exposed? How deviant. Was Rimi an exhibitionist?
露出狂
Okay, you know what? My timer has 1:45 left. Although I do kind of think this might be a decent cutting off point, so I'm thinking I might just go and end this episode a tad bit early. Because we did finally exit those delusions. Well, I say finally. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and actually end the episode a little bit early. Of course, if I take into account the talking that I did prior to starting the timer, it doesn't really matter. I ended up probably still going to about the 50-minute mark anyway. So that's going to be it for this episode. Actually, you know what? No, I'll go over 31. So I will see you guys next week, barring anything, of course, coming up that stops me from being able to record an episode for next week, although I don't think that'll be the case. And so, yeah, I will see you guys on, what is that? I want to say 26th. No, I don't think that's right. Let me, you know what? I'll just go ahead and, oh no, it is the 26th. Okay. Yeah. So I will see you guys again, hopefully, on the 26th. But until then, as always, like, throw, comment, subscribe, share, and I will see you guys next time. But until then, goodbye and farewell.